Today is Cinco de Mayo. And so I thought as we begin, we would do a little history lesson as we honor and celebrate the courage and bravery and resilience of the Mexican people. And so I'll tell you just briefly that Cinco de Mayo is not Mexican Independence Day. However, it is the celebration of the win at the Battle of Puebla in 1862. The French had invaded, and the Mexican people that were at the Puebla, the military was smaller, less equipped, less experienced than the French army that came in. However, the French army came in with a very overinflated confidence. And they charged the fortress, expecting it to go easily and quickly and to just take it. And they tried once, fell back, tried again, fell back. 3 times they attempted to take this fortress. And finally, when they had lost about 500 men, and the Mexican army had only lost about 80, less than 100 soldiers, the French retreated. And the Mexican people felt this reignited passion and patriotism, and were just energized by this win. Now, part of why Cinco de Mayo is so celebrated is because in the States, Chicano activists in the 60s wanted a way to connect with their heritage. And so it became a holiday for the Chicano people in the States, and it spread. The funny thing is, the people of Mexico don't actually celebrate Cinco de Mayo in Mexico. They celebrate it in Puebla, where the battle took place, but not so much as we celebrate it outside of Mexico. And I thought it's just a beautiful way to take a moment to honor that passion, that resiliency, that courage, because truly those are the qualities you need in order to be and stay in relationship with people. Courage, resiliency, compassion. Because sometimes our relationships are the most challenging experiences we have in life. Maybe also the most rewarding. But hopefully you won't go to war with your loved ones as we talk today about tapping into the power of connection. Oh, I better do a time check. I can talk for hours. Are we on time? What time is it and what time do I need to be done? Oh, I've got a ton of time. Yes, I do. Can Giorgio or Janice, somebody give me 5-minute warning when it's before time for Q&A? Perfect. Somebody say, flash a 5 minutes at me. And we always make it work in that time frame. Wherever we're at, we make it work. But I forget sometimes to watch the time when I'm so inspired to connect with you. So there's a British journalist, writer named Johann Hari, and he wrote a book called The Lost Connection. And in this book, he talks about how the remedy for depression and anxiety is actually connection. That there are many, many remedies, including drugs and therapies, whatever you're needed to fulfill your health in your life. He doesn't say any of those treatments are bad or wrong, but he says that the one thing that we're really missing is connection. And so he told a story about a housing unit in Berlin. He went and he met, hello. He went and spoke with them, this housing project in Berlin. Now, in this housing project, the main groups of people that were there were Muslim immigrants, gay men, and punk squatters. Now, the reason why there was such an interesting, diverse groups of people here in this particular housing project was because when the wall was up, it was the front line. The front line, so the most dangerous. But after the wall was down, all of a sudden, a place where nobody wanted to live previously was now prime real estate. Well, these groups of people who were living on the fringe of society, this was their home. But as sometimes we see happen, they wanted to capitalize on this new prime real estate. And so there was people that were getting evicted, and they wanted to develop the land. So there was one lady named Nuria. She was a Muslim immigrant, and she was getting evicted. And she put a sign in her window that said, "I'm getting evicted next Friday, so next Thursday I'm going to kill myself." Well, her neighbors began to notice, and they knocked on the door. Nuria, they probably didn't even know her name, but they found it out when she put this sign up. And they, "Are you okay? Can we help you? What's going on?" And she says, "It's hopeless. I have nowhere to go. I have no one to care for me." She was in a wheelchair. She said, "I'm going to commit suicide." And they started gathering outside of her apartment, people who'd never really spoken to each other before, and they started to say, "Oh, wait a minute, maybe we can do something about this." So Tanya, one of the punk squatters, decided to organize a protest. And so they said, "Hey, if we shut down," there was a big street and a thoroughfare right there called Kati. "If we shut down Kati and we make a noise and we demand that they not kick out Nuria, maybe we can make a change here. Maybe we can do something about this." And so these diverse group of people got together and they made a protest. And they said, "Oh, the media will come." You know, they came, and so their story is starting to get out. And then they thought, okay, well, that was great, the end of the first day. If we just take our barricade down and all go back to life like normal, Nuria is still going to get evicted. What do we do? So Tanya says, "Let's keep this barricade up all night and all day. But if nobody is at the barricade, the police will just come and they'll take it down. And that wouldn't serve anyone." So they created a schedule and they staffed the barricade 24 hours a day. And then all of a sudden you have these people who've never spoken to each other before. They start to speak and connect and talk with one another. Nuria and Tanya, completely, on the outside, completely different women. After spending a few shifts together, they realized that they had some things in common. They had both immigrated to a new place without anyone else, and then they ended up having young children. So they were both mothers with children in a new place, and now they had found each other and they formed a bond. And not just Nuria and Tanya, but many people in this community who would have never spoken began to talk to one another. And one of the most interesting stories that Johann Hari tells is the story of Tong Kai. He shows up at the barricade, and you can tell he has some learning differences. And he's homeless. And so people say, "Well, Tong Kai, just live in the barricade." Because by this point, they actually had a roof over the barricade. It's kind of like a permanent structure. And Tong Kai said, "Okay, I'll live in the barrier." And the police were there one day, and Tong Kai was very uncomfortable with conflict. So the police, he tried to hug the police. Well, police thought he was trying to attack them. and they arrested him and took him to jail. When they got to jail with Tong Kai, they found out that he had actually been living in a psychiatric ward for 20 years, mostly in a padded cell. He had escaped and was living on the street when he turned up at Kati. And so the police said, well, we're taking you back to the psychiatric ward. They took him back. Well, guess who shows up? The Muslim immigrants, the gay men, the punk squatters, they show up at the psychiatric hospital protesting to let Tong Kai out. Can you imagine what that would even look like? And you know what they told the people at the psychiatric hospital? They said, you don't love Tong Kai. He doesn't belong with you. We love him. He belongs with us. People that didn't even know one another came together and formed a powerful community. That to me sounds like family. Yeah? Tong Kai was released. Nuria didn't lose her apartment. This group of people went on to lead one of the largest protests in the area for rent control. To have this safe community that they now called home. That's the power of connection. It saved lives in this case. So I want to talk a little bit about how you can tap into that power of connection. The first thing that comes to mind, and one of the first things that they showed us at Kati, is that connection requires engagement. You got to show up and listen and also share. These people, they showed up for each other. So it requires us to let people in, right? When we let them in by listening and hearing their story. And we also must let ourselves out. Let ourselves be seen. Let ourselves be heard. And that's the first part of connection requires this engagement. Showing up, being seen and heard in that mutual exchange. You know, I don't know about you, but sometimes letting myself be seen and heard is quite vulnerable. And of course, whenever I think of vulnerability, I think of Brené Brown. Love her. She defines vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. So vulnerability can be the deeper stuff. It can be what's living underneath the surface. I want to invite each one of you into connection, into deeper connection in your life. And the way we deepen that is by going a little bit deeper, by sharing a little bit more about what's meaningful or what's really happening. There's an activity that I've done at workshops before where you say, if you really knew me, you would know, and you finish that sentence. If you really knew me, you would know. So I want you to think about someone in your life that connecting with them would be valuable for you. Either you already want to connect with them, or you see the value in connecting with them. Sometimes we have to connect with people we don't really want to connect with, right? Like, I don't know, like a boss. But I want you to think about, if you were telling that person, if you really knew me, you would know. What would you say? How would you finish that sentence? Now, you might not literally go up to them and say that, but maybe you would. And maybe there's another way to have that conversation. You could even say, Cassandra challenged me to say this and to share a little bit about myself, so here I am. Sharing your authentic thoughts and feelings in the face of possible ridicule or rejection, that's vulnerability. Maybe in the face of criticism or judgment or defense, people defending themselves, it's difficult to share deeper parts of yourself. However, what we know about humanity is that when we're not in connection, remember those experiments they did with babies? How babies who were not engaged with, not physically touched and held, that they literally die. And I think that us as adults, that we also die. We die in different ways though, right? We die without purpose. We die without meaning. We might feel lonely or isolated or hopeless. But when we can connect and have the courage to show up and share and listen to understand instead of to defend or prove your point, magical things can shift and change. Just like they did at Kati. That same power that they tapped into together is the same power that's right here in this room. Right here within each one of us. Each one of us has the ability to tap into that power, to access it. So while vulnerability does call for courage, I believe that it even calls even more so for kindness. Tara Brach, she's a Buddhist teacher and speaker, and she's also a psychologist. She wrote a book called True Refuge, Finding Peace and Freedom in Your Own Awakened Heart. And here's what she says. The intimacy that arises in listening and speaking truth is only possible if we can open to the vulnerability of our own hearts. Breathing in, contacting the life that is right here is our first step. And once we've held ourselves with kindness, we can touch others in a vital and healing way. I want to experience the vital healing of touch, of being connected, of being in community. And it begins with a willingness to be kind to yourself. to any of those hard edges or pain that you might feel inside of you, maybe regret of what you didn't have in your life, kindness can wrap that pain in love, allowing it to come up and out. And that's freedom. Imagine if that thing that you regret or that thing that you wished you'd had, imagine if you felt tenderness toward that thing. That's the healing power, when you can feel that pain and wrap it in kindness for yourself. Because sometimes love might even be a stretch. But compassion for the experience you've had can create that soft yet powerful courage to show up and share, to show up and listen how you might not have listened before, to walk in somebody else's shoes, and or to connect with someone you never thought you would even like. One of the things that Tanya said about this experience at Kati was that we realized we had to take small steps to understand one another. And that there were amazing people living around them the whole time, and they didn't know. The power of connection was living right underneath the surface the entire time. The power that they needed was there the entire time. And so I'm just going to imagine that the power that I need to create what I want in my life, that it's here, right now, already here, even though at times I am overwhelmed with moving to another country. I have never done that before. And yet, the power I need to lean on, to call upon, is right here. Johann Hari says that the struggle is the solution. That the solution is the connections and community that were built up around this problem. And what I say is that connection is the solution. So wherever you're at, I want you to think about an area of your life or a relationship. And I want you to consider how might connection serve and empower you? What can you apply? When you think about the things we talked about, this engagement, showing up, being present with your mind and your heart, and listening and sharing, being vulnerable, and yet being kind in the process. Which one of these do you want to call upon to tap into that power of connection in your own life? So that's your homework. To be where you are, to hold yourself in kindness, and to connect in some way, shape, or form.